At a recent screening of RRR in one of the biggest INOX theaters of Los Angeles, USA, the full house cheered, whistled, and danced in the presence of director SS Rajamouli. That's months after the film released. That's weeks after it started streaming on Netflix. From another single 3-hour show at the Chinese theater, the film minted a whooping $21,000, around 17 lakhs in Indian currency. The stories keep on coming as the craze around RRR refuses to go down. The craze that had took over the Telugu belt in India around a decade back, then moved on to the entire country, and now up on its toes to take on the entire world. So what's in this Rajamouli world that takes the audience back to the theaters in this era of streaming? What's the origin to this world of director Rajamouli? What's his magic formulas that keep on working every time? And is there a political or communal agenda to any of these, as the section of the cinema world questions? In this video, we try to analyze all that and more as we retract the rise of director SS Rajamouli, the poster boy of Indian mainstream cinema on the global map. Before we go there, he is requesting some more love in terms of likes, shares and subscriptions. We are nearing the milestone of 10,000 subscriptions, and with your support we can get there by this month. Thank you for being there with us all this while. When Bollywood started looking westward from around 2000, Rajamouli emerged with a clear vision of his style and substance, carefully carrying on the legacy of mainstream Telugu filmmaking. Do not get us wrong here. We are no way against the subtle, subdued approach that Bollywood took around this time, and will keep on celebrating the same. However, one cannot deny how a good section of the national audience started feeling disconnected from here on, and one can only be in awe of Rajamouli's confidence in being stuck to his sense of cinema and never be distracted by what others think or make. It is this faith in his vision that makes him the man he is. It is this love for mainstream that elevates the cliché trappings of his cinema. It is that stamp that comes at the end of Rajamouli film, a brand of pure joy that sets him apart from his contemporaries like Rohit Shetty or Puri Jagannath, even if all of them had set out to make another flat-out entertainer. So what's this Rajamouli recipe? Let's dissect. The cinematic duality, an inspiration that cinema takes from life, a motive that has always worked in favor of drama. More than often you will notice Rajamouli's heroes to have dual personas or double roles, and the cutover points are carefully constructed to derive the maximum impact in storytelling. Be the dual life of NTR Jr. in Simhadri, the double avatars of Ravi Teja in Vikramakudu, or the reincarnation of Ramcharan in Magadhira. Rajamouli has always fallen back to this recurring motive. In India, one of the very few countries where theatrical releases come with an interval, we are anyway used to this sense of duality in our idea of cinema, which Rajamouli thrives on. And while he repeats the motive, he also keeps on sharpening and subverting. In RRR, the same Sita Ramaraju becomes different personas across the length of the film. In the Bahubali saga, the film itself is broken into two parts, where Prabhas the son avenges Prabhas the father. And in Iga, like a father of all subversions, Nani the fly avenges Nani the lover boy. This idea of duality also builds up to the whistle-worthy eco-effects in the Rajamouli universe. Jeevan Nadi, the river that saves the infant Mahendra Bahubali in the first frame of Bahubali the beginning, will mark the end of Balladeva's pride in the last frames of Bahubali the conclusion, as his golden bust breaks and flows away from Mahismati. The twigs of Devasena collect in the first film will construct the deathbed for Ballav Dev in the second installment, or the protecting string that Bhim gives to Sita Ramaraju when the two are friends turn into the leash that Raju uses against Bhim when they fight each other. Cycle of life friends that Rajamouli embeds into his motifs of duality, which then start working both visually as well as metaphorically and thereby cinematically. The dramatic exaggeration. Well, mainstream cinema is all about excess and exaggeration, and even then there's certain baselines to which we have adjusted ourselves to accept some and discard others. Director Rajamouli is someone who questions such baselines. He places the exaggerations in his films in such a way that you hardly have a moment to breathe and consider whether what you watch makes or breaks your individual baselines. Once the film is over, you might be laughing at the many set pieces, but when it's playing in the theater screen, you play along. So many times we say gravity defying to express the impact of a brave action, and in Magadhira, Ramcharan's Kalbhairava actually defies gravity in his end moments as he accelerates towards his lover in air. When luck doesn't favor, even the mosquito kicks the elephant, we say. And that's literally what Iga turns out to be, as a mere fly takes on the most powerful man. Not one, not two, but Kalabhairava defeats 100 soldiers in a row so as to establish himself to be the bravest of all. Not one, not two, but a full herd of animals jumps out of Bhim's truck in RRR as if expressing the ferocity of the man's wrath, filling up the canvas from corner to corner. Not one point in the frame can be left empty, seems to be the politics of the framing, such that even if you miss one tiger roaring, there's another to follow, and so on. Rajamouli doesn't only tell a story emphasizing on plot points, but he focuses on the adjectives and superlatives that the script might have for those plot points of characters to create a spectacle that only the medium of cinema can achieve. That is why he chooses rugby and not cricket as the sport to fight for survival in Sai. The fight of the characters has to come out in actions, in visuals, and not through dialogues alone. That is why Mahendra Bahubali doesn't only free her mother from the chains of Bhallal Dev, but also uses the chains to punch him. That is why Devasena has the golden bust of Bhallal Dev falling on her feet as a bridge to cross the fire on her way. The pride of the king has to fall down below literally and figuratively in Rajamouli canvas. And that is why when Josh Hurtado had watched Iga for the first time on the big screen, he was mind blown even when the screening didn't have subtitles. The visuals communicate as the exaggerations keep on coming. And if you go back to the birth of cinema, that's where it all started. The elements of folklore. Well, that's inherent in Telugu cinema, and Rajamouli carries the baton like no one else. It's the emergence of a leader that's the crux of most of his films, something folklores have always offered us. Whether it is the Mahabharata-like politics over the throne in Bahubali, or the layer of Ram-Ravana battle on India's freedom fight in RRR, Rajamouli has always tapped onto these subtexts rooted to Indian history, society, and mythology. Animals, an important part of ancient Indian living, are recurring motifs in Rajamouli's filmography. In his earlier films, these animals were icons of violence, ferocity or savagery of his villains, like the bull representing Bhikshu Yadav in Sai, or the serpent of Rash Bihari's hand in Chhatrapati. And then came Iga, where things changed, as director Rajamouli surfaced to be more sensitive. The old school Rajamouli would have Prabhas punched the wild elephant to its death in that early sequence of Bahubali 2. But the now nuanced director has him controlling the animal and pacify it, as the mammoth idol of Ganesha shows up on the screen. Bhima fights with the tiger, imprisons it to suit his own goal, but the emphatic Rajamouli also makes him ask for the animal's forgiveness. Now, this recurring motive of Hindu subtexts and iconography is something director Rajamouli is mostly criticized about, more so now when the country is split into left and right lobbies. But we need to understand that it's no new investment for him in pursuit to exploit the ongoing fervor of the country. Growing up to the stories of Amar Chitrakatha or coming from the legacy of Telugu mythologicals, it's only normal that Rajamouli's film will have such motives. But do also consider how Nasar's character stands up for the so-called untouchables in Simhadri, fighting for their rights to enter the temple. Consider Sudeep's cameo in Bahubali, the Muslim fighter from Middle East who values Kattappa's bravery and extends his friendship. Consider how NTR Jr. tricks the god of death in Yamadonga and is given shelter by a courageous Muslim family in RRR as his Bhim disguises to be Akhtar. God will emerge from the common man, a character says, as NTR Jr. is bathed in milk after he kills a sexual offender in Simhadri back in 2003. And it is the continuation of that philosophy that's repeated in 2022's RRR as Ramcharan emerges as Lord Ram in his fight for India's freedom. And then whom does RRR's Lord Ram have as his aide? A tribal fighter, a so-called backward class. As director Rajamouli himself says, if you take the religion, I'm also not a Hindu. If you take the dharma, I'm very much a Hindu. What I am portraying in the film is actually a way of life that has existed for many centuries and eons. You can only welcome this thought in today's India if you can be a little more pragmatic. The perfect punctuations. Why did Kattappa kill Bahubali? The entire nation lived up to the expectation of this exposition for almost 2 years. And if you go through SS Rajamouli's filmography, you will realize how this iconic punctuation to end the first part of a saga wasn't new for him. A Rajamouli film is constructed around its set pieces more than the basic story. Only a very confident director can think that way, which Rajamouli started from his first film, Student Number 1. Remember the interval twist when NTR Jr. reveals that he actually goes to the central jail when he refers to going home. The entire first half builds up to this set piece, leaving the audience shocked at interval. Remember the fight and then the sequence of Indu stabbing Simhadri at the interval, exactly reminiscent of Katappa killing Bahubali, as the audience now forgets all blemishes that they might have noticed all this while and wonder what just happened. The stories are all linear, they are quite the same, but it's these twists, the expositions, the revelations that the audience is waiting for that Rajamouli Affairs thrives on, the perfect essence of pure mainstream. And the man is only improving at it, sharpening his skills of set piece making. Long sequences of lame comic reliefs were regular motifs in his earlier films. He has almost gotten rid of it in his recent films. We find hardly any fan-pleasing moments in RRR, just for the sake of it, like they were in his earlier films. A character like Kumara Varma, who would just be cracking lame jokes and cringy dialogues in his old films, but in Bahubali, on top of the comic relief, the character also adds to the plot. As we say, while the man is still thriving on the cliché trappings of the mainstream, he is a man in progress, gradually cutting loose of the more cringy frills. And that brings us to the one area where we have major problems with the Rajamouli universe: the cringe and the casual misogyny. Yes, that's definitely something of the past, and the new Rajamouli is a far more nuanced maker here, like in all other aspects. But those songs in his earlier films, the entire sequence in Sai where the hero and his friends push, force and get a tattoo done on the heroine's waist, as if it's an object to put your stamp on, or the male gaze in Simhadri, Vikramarkudu or Yamadonga are way too repulsive. Now guess what? These are also motives that work very well for the Indian box office, and Rajamouli's mainstream vision had fallen in line for years into this pit. Even in the first installment of Bahubali, in the way Prabhas disrobes Tamanna's warrior clothing, paints on her body without consent, and still we watch her fall for him, might be a more subtle version of the cringe of his earlier films, but it was a continuation nevertheless. But Bahubali the conclusion comes as a necessary relief. Bahubali holds on to the promise made to Devasena, even if that means enraging his mother and sacrificing the throne. Devasena herself denies vehemently when Shivagami asks her to stand beside Ballal Deva and questions her thought in the royal court. A film with clear subtext to Mahabharata puts up an amazing subversion here. Consider the episode of Arjun bringing in Draupadi, Kunti asking him to share whatever he has got with his brothers, and how Arjun obliges. Rajamouli hits at that clear piece of objectification and patriarchy again in this interval sequence, which we would call out to be the watershed moment of this man's career. And that's why we consider the second installment of Bahubali to be the best he has ever delivered. RRR could have had a better scope for its woman, but it's not problematic in any way. However, we do wish we have a Rajamouli project with woman as its prime protagonist, as that too has enough references in our history and mythology. The man has given us so many reasons for thrill and excitement, so many memories at the movies. But if you follow the arc, go through the filmography, you would perhaps realize there's much more to come. He's only sharpening at ideas, themes and motives he anyways started with. Hope that efforts continue as he goes on to bring more limelight to the Indian masala genre that's now being recognized worldwide. But let's also remember, he can pull that off only because that's his inherent sense of films, his embedded thought process and cinema upbringing. Blunt copies or box office inspired replications by makers belonging to a different school of cinema wouldn't yield the same results. Like Rajamouli himself never stepped out of his universe for what's working well for someone else at that point of time. Hope that understanding prevails and hope our cinema doesn't turn into only spectacle favoring. That is all from us today. Thank you for watching.